I used to think beaches were peaceful. You know, places where people go to breathe, to escape, to feel the kind of calm that only the ocean can give. I grew up loving that sound, that steady hush of waves that felt like the earth itself was exhaling. But now, when I hear it, I feel my chest tighten, because the ocean hides things, and the night, especially near the water, has a way of showing you just how small and unprepared you really are. The story I'm about to tell you isn't something I share often. It's one of those memories that sticks like a film over everything that came after. It started during a summer when life still felt light, when I thought nothing bad could really happen if the sun was shining and my friends were near. I was 16 then. My two best friends, Charles and Riley, and I had planned a long weekend at Charles's family beach house on Long Beach Island. His parents were away, and that small detail, no adults, was all we needed to hear. We packed too much beer, not enough food, and the kind of confidence only teenagers have when they don't know what danger actually feels like. Riley had just gotten his license, and he drove us down, weaving through the highway like the world was ours. We played music, shouted out the windows, and laughed at everything. Because that's what you do when you're 16 and convinced nothing can touch you. The house itself was perfect in that ordinary coastal way. A white 2-story place with weathered wood siding, a spiral staircase leading from the deck down to the yard, and a narrow lagoon right behind it that connected to the bay. If you stood on the back deck at night, you could see the soft reflections of other houses across the water, their lights trembling on the surface like weak candles. I remember thinking how quiet it was. Too quiet, maybe. But I brushed it off. It was just the calm before the party, I thought. That first night, everything was laughter and chaos. We'd invited a few girls we'd been talking to online. Rosie, Alexa, and Sophie, and somehow they actually showed up. We smoked, we swam in the pool. The air was warm and heavy with salt and weed and teenage arrogance. The kind of night that feels like it will never end. But it did. And it ended in a way that changed the way I look at water and shadows and even my own reflection. Because somewhere between the laughter and the music, between the clinking of bottles and the low hum of the pool filter, something shifted. Charles turned the music down and stared past me toward the lagoon. I thought he was joking when he said he saw someone standing on the opposite dock watching us, but he wasn't. And when a passing car's headlights swept across the water just long enough to catch what he'd seen, I understood why his voice shook. There were 4 of them, 4 tall silhouettes standing perfectly still at the edge of the dock, facing us. The girls went silent. The water rippled once, twice, and then we heard it. 4 distinct splashes breaking through the quiet. Whoever they were swimming toward us. I still hear that sound sometimes. In dreams, the heavy rhythm of arms cutting through black water, getting closer, slower, deliberate. That was the moment the beach stopped feeling like a place of peace. That was the moment the ocean became something else. Something alive, watching, waiting. The moment those splashes hit the water, everything inside me froze. For half a second, I hoped I'd misheard that maybe it was just fish, or something falling from the dock, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I could see the ripples widening in the dark, faintly catching the reflection of the backyard light. We stood there like idiots, still wet from the pool, too stunned to move. Then Charles whispered, "Go inside. Now." The tone of his voice snapped something in me, like a rubber band stretched too far. We scrambled out of the yard, dripping water across the deck as Riley slammed the sliding door shut behind us. I could hear his hands shaking on the lock. Charles ran to the front door and twisted the deadbolt so hard it clanked. The girls were crying, whispering questions none of us could answer. I remember standing in the living room, listening to the sound of my own breathing, trying to hear anything else. Any hint of movement outside. Nothing. Just the hum of the fridge and the faint tapping of rain beginning to fall against the glass. Then Riley muttered a curse. He'd forgotten to lock the upstairs deck door, the one that connected to the spiral staircase outside. Before any of us could move, there was a sound above us, soft, deliberate footsteps, as if someone was trying not to be heard. Every hair on my neck rose. We didn't think. We just ran. The front door burst open, we sprinted barefoot into the night, across gravel and cold pavement, straight to Riley's car. He started the engine with trembling hands, tires screeching against the wet road. I looked back once through the rear window and saw the house shrink into darkness. In that split second, I thought I saw a shape on the deck, tall, still, watching. We didn't stop until we reached the main road, headlights cutting through the mist. Nobody spoke for a long time. It felt like something had followed us, like the fear had a weight to it, sitting in the car with us, breathing just behind our shoulders. When we finally called the police, the words came out messy and broken. People in the house, they swam across. They're inside. The dispatcher's tone changed when she realized how young we were. She told us to stay put and wait for the officers. I remember the smell of salt and sweat on my skin while we waited, headlights glowing weakly on the road. When the police finally cleared the house, they found the sliding door upstairs open. Wet footprints leading through the hallway. Everything valuable on the top floor was gone. Watches, jewelry, electronics, and so was Charles's family boat. It wasn't a big one, but it was enough to get them far. The police said the keys were missing too, but Charles's dad had always kept a spare hidden inside a small hatch below the steering wheel. No one else knew about that. That detail haunted us more than anything else. Whoever broke in wasn't random. They knew the house, knew the layout, and knew the boat. Maybe they even knew Charles's parents were gone that weekend. The investigation went nowhere. No arrests, no sightings of the stolen boat. Just another summer crime that faded from the headlines before it ever made sense. But it didn't fade for me. Every night for months, I'd wake up thinking I heard water lapping against the dock outside my window, the sound of slow, measured strokes cutting through the dark. I stopped going to the beach. I stopped sleeping with the lights off. I started checking every lock twice. Sometimes, even now, I catch myself glancing at the shadows beyond my backyard fence, waiting for something to move. It's strange how fast a place you once loved can turn against you. How something as familiar as the smell of sea air can make your stomach twist. Back then, I thought we'd left it all behind when we drove away that night. But fear doesn't really leave. It just waits for a reminder. And for me, that reminder came years later when I saw Charles again for the first time since that night. I hadn't seen Charles in almost a decade. Life has a way of scattering people. You move, grow up, forget to call, and then one day you're suddenly 30, realizing you haven't spoken to someone who once knew every detail of your teenage years. The beach story had become a sort of ghost between us, a memory neither of us ever tried to revisit. I didn't even plan on going to the reunion that night. It was my girlfriend who convinced me. I walked into that rented event hall expecting awkward smiles and polite small talk, not ghosts. But there he was, Charles leaning against the bar, older but unmistakable, talking with Riley like no time had passed. For a second, I hesitated. Seeing them together again hit me like a wave of déjà vu, the kind that drags you under before you can breathe. Then Charles looked up, his face lighting with that same crooked grin I remembered. "Man, it's been forever," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt both strange and comforting. We talked, we laughed, and for a while, it was easy to forget what connected us beyond the good memories. As the night went on, people peeled away one by one, the laughter thinning out into background noise. Charles suggested we grab a drink at a bar down the street, just the two of us, like old times. Riley couldn't come. He had a flight the next morning. So, it was just me and Charles, sitting in the dim corner of a dive bar that smelled like salt and whiskey, catching up on the last 10 years. The conversation drifted from work to family to the random people we used to know. And then, inevitably, the beach house came up. Charles was the one who mentioned it, his voice low and almost hesitant, like testing the water before diving in. "You remember that night?" he asked. "Of course," I said. "I still can't believe it happened." He let out a dry laugh, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table, and said quietly, "There's something I never told you." I felt my stomach tighten. His tone wasn't nostalgic, it was heavy, careful. "It's about my brother," he said. "Kieran. He's 19 now." Charles paused, rubbing the condensation off his beer glass before continuing. Last year, he and his friends took our new boat out one evening. Didn't tell my parents, just decided to take it for a spin after drinking. Idiots. He gave a bitter smile. They went out near Coral Island, you know, that wildlife refuge off the bay. You're not supposed to anchor there after dark. I nodded slowly, unsure where this was going, but already uneasy. Charles continued, voice lower now. Anyway, they dropped anchor close to the shore and swam to the beach to hang out, drink more, whatever. Then one of them noticed another boat anchored farther down, half hidden by the reeds. Kieran swore it looked just like our old one, the one that got stolen. My pulse quickened. You're serious? I asked. Charles nodded. He said he was sure. Same model, same faded paint on the hull. He even remembered a scratch near the bow. He took a deep breath. They swam out to get a closer look, but by the time they got there, the sun was almost gone. It was hard to see, but he swore it was ours. They didn't have their phones. They'd left them on their own boat, so they decided to swim back, grab them, and come closer for pictures. But as they were walking down the beach, they saw a man. Charles paused again, glancing at the window as if checking the dark outside before speaking. Kieran said he was holding something, a shovel maybe, and he started walking toward them. The noise of the bar seemed to fade. They ran, Charles said. The guy started running too. Kieran said it was like he'd been waiting for them to turn around. He chased them until they reached their boat. By the time they looked back, he was gone. But they could hear something, another boat engine, faint, moving somewhere behind them as they sped off. My chest felt tight. Did they call the police? I asked. No, Charles said bitterly. They were terrified of getting caught. Underage drinking, unauthorized trip, the whole thing. They went home, told no one. The next morning, guilt hit Kieran hard. So he told my parents minus the drinking. My dad lost it. He called the cops, filed a report, gave them all the details. But guess what? He let out a humorless laugh. Nothing. No trace of the boat. No follow-up. Just like before. The bar's neon light flickered, painting his face in pulses of red and blue. It's strange, isn't it? He said softly. After all these years, that boat shows up again, near a restricted island, and there's a man there digging, maybe burying something. He looked at me for a long moment. Sometimes I wonder if the people who swam across that night never left. I didn't know what to say. The thought hung between us, heavy and alive. Outside, the wind picked up, and for a second, I could almost hear waves again, rolling somewhere far beyond the city, whispering against a dock that never forgot us. Charles and I didn't talk much after that night at the bar. It wasn't deliberate. Some stories are too heavy to keep passing around. But what he told me never stopped echoing in my mind. The idea of that boat, our boat, still floating somewhere near Coral Island, like a ghost that refused to sink. I tried to convince myself that Kieran must have been mistaken, that maybe the resemblance was coincidence or his memory had twisted over time. But late at night, I'd picture those four silhouettes standing on the dock, the splashes in the lagoon, the sound of water being cut by unseen arms. It all connected too cleanly, like a story looping back on itself. I didn't hear from Charles again for months, not until I got a short text one afternoon that read, "You won't believe this." And I called him. His voice sounded off tight, rushed. He said Kieran had gone back to that same area with one of his friends a few days earlier, this time sober, in daylight, hoping to prove what he saw wasn't just drunken paranoia. They brought binoculars, even a camera, but the other boat was gone. The only thing left near the shore was a half-buried piece of fiberglass, the same dull blue as their old hull, and nearby, a rusted shovel. The police didn't care. They said it could have washed up from anywhere, but that detail, the shovel, made something in me twist, because when Charles had first told me about the man Kieran saw, that image stuck. A stranger on an empty beach at night, holding a shovel like he was either hiding something or waiting for someone to find it. Maybe both. The more I thought about it, the less it felt random. Maybe it wasn't just a robbery all those years ago. Maybe the house had been a target for something else and we were just in the way. Maybe the people who came across the lagoon weren't there to steal. They were there to take back what they'd already hidden. And maybe, when they realized we'd seen them, they decided to move whatever it was again. Those thoughts became an obsession I couldn't shake. I tried searching old news archives, looking for anything missing persons, buried remains, unidentified boats, but there was nothing. Still, it didn't feel finished. It felt like the kind of story that doesn't end, because it's not supposed to. The kind that lingers, waiting to be told again so it can keep existing. A few weeks after that call, I drove down to Long Beach Island alone. I told myself it was for closure, though I'm not sure I believed that. The old house was still there. Different but the same, with new paint and strangers living inside. The lagoon behind it was quiet. The docks on the far side looked smaller than I remembered, like distance had shrunk them. I stood at the edge of the water and waited for that familiar chill to rise, the one that used to crawl up my spine when I thought something was staring back. It came, faint at first, then sharper as the wind shifted. The water was still, but I could see small bubbles breaking the surface near the middle of the channel, like something just beneath was exhaling. I told myself it was fish. I told myself a lot of things that day. All of them lies, meant to hold the fear still long enough for me to leave. But when I turned to go, I heard it again, that slow, rhythmic sound of water being parted. 1, 2, 3 strokes. The sound of someone swimming. I didn't stay to look. I ran, the way I did years ago, barefoot on cold pavement, heart hammering. By the time I reached my car, the sound had faded, replaced by the hum of the wind and the low hiss of waves brushing the dock. I sat there for a long time, watching the water through the windshield, trying to tell myself the past doesn't repeat. But some nights, when I close my eyes, I can still hear those strokes slow, even deliberate somewhere just beyond reach. I don't know if it's memory or something real, something that never stopped moving. Maybe they never left that water. Maybe they just wait for it to get dark again. I don't tell this story to scare people. Not exactly. I tell it because sometimes you can go your whole life thinking you've left something behind when really, it's still trailing you quietly, patiently, like ripples that never stop spreading. That night on the beach changed the way I see everything. It made me realize that some places hold memories too deeply to let go. Long Beach Island isn't just a strip of sand and shore to me anymore. It's a wound that never quite healed. Every time I hear the ocean, no matter where I am, it sounds like breathing. Slow, steady, human. I still dream of that dock sometimes. I see the 4 silhouettes standing at the edge, motionless, waiting. And when I wake up, I can never shake the feeling that maybe the dream isn't a dream at all, that maybe something's calling me back, asking me to remember. Charles told me, before we lost touch again, that his family sold the house. He said they moved inland, away from the water, but his voice broke when he said it, like he knew it wouldn't make a difference. He said Kieran doesn't go near the ocean anymore, not even to look. I understood why, because once you've seen the dark move on its own, once you've heard something inhuman swim toward you from silence, the sea stops being beautiful. It becomes a mirror that reflects back everything you're afraid of. Sometimes, late at night, I find myself scrolling through satellite maps, tracing the outline of the island, looking for that lagoon. I zoom in on the channels, the docks, the narrow strip of water where it all began, half expecting to see something there, a boat without lights, drifting. I never do, but I know it's out there. Maybe not the boat itself, but the presence, the feeling, that same quiet hunger that lives where the light doesn't reach. People like to say the ocean keeps its secrets. I think that's only half true. I think it shows them to the people who are foolish enough to look too long, who think the dark water is harmless because it looks still. The truth is, still, water can hide anything. Sometimes I wonder if what we saw that night wasn't even human. Maybe it used the shape of people because that's what we'd recognize. Maybe it learned how to walk and swim and breathe just enough to trick us into thinking it belonged here. Maybe that's why it took the boat, because it wanted to stay close to shore, to keep watching. I don't have proof. I don't think I want any. All I know is that fear doesn't fade, it just changes shape. It becomes a story you carry until it finds a new listener, someone willing to let it in. And if you ever find yourself standing near a lagoon at night, where the water is black and the air smells like salt and rust, don't stare too long at the opposite dock. Don't wait for movement. Don't listen for splashes. Because once you hear them, it's already too late. They're already halfway across.